For Global and Business Africa Business Update, Rotus Odiri joins us now. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning to all our viewers, and congrats again to Arise for the award-winning streak that we continue to be on. Global news: Asian markets are positive this morning on Janet Yellen's comments coming out of her 3-4-day visit to China, saying that there was a productive, positive outcome, and the U.S. and China are on surer footage. Actually, the markets opened up a bit mixed before, of course, Yellen's comments was the catalyst for the markets to go up, because some of the data coming out of China, or rather Ant Group, I think I should start with Ant Group, the People's Bank of China confirmed that they had fined them about $985 million last week. I think it's on Friday or so. So basically, and the market's client, particularly Alibaba, since this is their fintech arm, which they spun off as a separate unit. So Alibaba shares in Hong Kong, they rose basically because the People's Bank of China said that this has finally come to an end. So they've closed the chapter, and hopefully you'll have a less stringent regulatory environment. However, China's inflation data, this is what caused the markets to be a bit mixed. Producer prices are now continue to maintain their deflationary status. A contraction of 5.4% year on year. The forecast was for 5% drop. May was 4.6%. China's producer price index has been in deflationary territory, I think, since October of last year. And so there is need for more stimulus coming out of China. The data from May was rough: industrial outputs, retail sales, and so on and so forth. I mentioned Yellen already, her saying that, she concludes her trip from China. We'll see whether the positive sentiment as far as the rhetoric coming out of, U.S.-China relations continues, because there's still a lot of ground that has to be broken. To the United States, we saw those non-farm payrolls, June figures coming out on Friday. The labor market seems to be cooling a bit, came out at 209,000 for June. Forecast was for 230,000. May was revised a bit downwards, 306,000. Over the last 6 months, the United States has averaged 278,000 jobs. We go further into the data. If we look at the unemployment rates, unemployment was at 3.6%, so coming down a bit from 3.7%. Your labor participation rate unchanged. And this is the key thing here, your average hourly earnings. This is what is keeping the Federal Reserve up late at night. Wage inflation continues to remain strong in the United States. And so if people continue to be hired and wages remain high, they will spend more money, inflation remains upwards, and then they've got to keep those interest rates up. As far as the sector highlights, government jobs, 60,000, construction, but we saw a loss in retail and temporary help. What's it called? The contract workers. That's what we saw there. What else is going on? I think we come now to Nigeria. Yeah, the Bureau of Statistics releasing our capital inflow figures for the first quarter. I mean, these numbers are really low. This is on January through March. Only $1 billion that came in. Year on year, 28% drop. Quarter on quarter compared to the quarter of last year, a 6.8% climb. If we look at the categories, as usual, it was still portfolio investors. That is, as Doctor calls it, and everybody else, hot money that goes in and out, going into the capital markets, but it's not stable. Other investments, loans, trade finance stuff, 38%. Then the lowest one, the one we really need, that President Tinubu has been focused on everywhere, is foreign direct investment, only about 4.2% of that coming in. The United Kingdom remains the main source of investment flows coming into the country. I think about 58% or so. Meanwhile, the UAE and the United States were only single digits. Speaking of President Tinubu, you already talked about him talking in ECOWAS. He did speak about a forum that he wants to put together in October. It says, in furtherance to my vision for our region's economic recovery and growth, Nigeria intends to convene an ECOWAS Extraordinary Summit on Trade and Investment in October of this year. He wants the members to come and showcase what they can do in terms of regional integration. So there is an event to provide opportunity for member states to showcase their potentials and encourage matchmaking in order to evolve business cooperation amongst the various organized private sectors within the region. Taiwo Oyedele talked about this, actually becoming a chair. Tinubu has made him the chair of a tax committee, which was formed last week or so. So this is a really, really encouraging choice. He's, of course, Africa tax leader, partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers. And so he's going to be leading that tax committee. And then finally, inflation in Egypt jumping to 35.7%. May was 32.7. Egypt, again, very dependent on wheat imports coming from the Ukraine and Russia. Currency pressures there. That is our update from the globe and Africa.
At first, what else can I say? And Taiwo Oyedele is quite a very stellar human being. And Rotus, I saw your triumphalism on Twitter. I knew the story before you.
Oh, yeah, you did, eh? We interviewed him.
I didn't just want to brag. Even before you interviewed him, I knew that story.
Rufai, nothing stops you from bragging. Go ahead, brag.
I knew the story, you know, because I was with him the night before, and, we had talked a lot, and, it's quite a
He's a great choice. He's a great choice.
Very, very stellar
private
choice.
Sector choice.
Very private sector choice, very stellar choice. Truth has to be told. One of the arguments is always made is the fact that multiple taxations definitely is killing business.
And we need to harmonize.
That you can do about 40 trillion with 6 taxes in this country. And you don't need to get over 30. And I think the multiple taxation thing came about by a very terrible form of thinking and planning. And that's why we must think out of the box. So you know what we do in Nigeria? Government has a new scheme. When you ask them the fine line, when they are writing the law, how do they fund it? They look and say, okay, let's throw in a 1% tax somewhere. Just exactly how they did with student loans.
Yeah.
You know, there are a couple of 1%, 2% here and there for student loans.
Yeah.
It's because people are not thinking out of the box on how to fund different schemes. And in the end, you don't really collect the money because in the end, the funding is low. The trickle-down account, it doesn't really trickle down to what you want to fund. So if you can very, very good taxes, minimize it, direct at the point, expand the base, get people to trust system even more, collect more in this, then we can top up to 18% tax to GDP. Currently, we're doing about 11%.
Yeah,
from
just
about
recently.
6.5.
It's been
just
single
recently.
digits,
Yeah, at least we can get to the West African average of 6%. I think Benin Republic goes about 15%.
Yep.
The West African average of 15%. I think Benin does 15%, Abidjan does about 12 to 15% thereabout. Maybe it's dropped recently. So, very good choice. But it's also subject to them listening to all he has to say.
Right.
Mr. Oyedele, because you see, it's one thing to get people on the chair, it's another thing to listen to them. Maybe if we had listened to the Ways reports and all the things that came out of that report, we'll not be where we are today. That's one. Number two, Rotus, these are the things we keep talking about. The fact that what we collect is quite low in this country, but we can bolster because we actually have big potential. But the thing about potential is when you don't convert your potential energy to kinetic, nothing happens. So how can we ensure that from collecting 1.1 billion, we can actually collect 50, we can actually collect 30 billion, even more.
It's the environment.
It's because we're not opening. You and I were in Abidjan together.
Yep.
And the conversation was about most African companies are not doing up to about little over 300 African companies are doing 1 billion in revenue, $1 billion US dollars in revenue. Yeah. And Europe is doing, Europe is doing about 3,000 companies doing 1 billion in revenue. And you can see the problems. And when you look at the African continent, that's why the GDP of the entire African continent is 3.14 trillion. Vis-a-vis Europe, that is about 15 trillion. Vis-a-vis America, that is about over 20 trillion. So we can do more in productivity. And it also segues into President Tinubu talking about that ECOWAS. So that if we open up ECOWAS, we have a trade display for them in Abuja. They can come, they can show their products, and we can do a whole lot more. Take, for instance, ECOWAS can be a 1 trillion GDP in the next couple of years if we harness the resource.
And because we trade barriers.
Yeah, because we're over 400 million population, spread across over 5 million square miles of very arable land, coupled with the fact that rich with natural resource. So we can do it. It's all about getting up and working. Africa is blessed.
Okay, you talked about Janet Yellen's visit.
Yeah, to China.
4-day trip to China, in the course of which she met with top policymakers in China. And she said, well, it was a good thing that, she was there. And that, the global space is big enough to accommodate the 2 largest economies in the world. And that China and the US, do not both have to step on each other. And that what exists between them is not a global power conflict. So it's reassuring to hear that from the point of view of global peace. Because, as they say, when 2 elephant's fight. It's the grass
that suffers.
that will suffer.
Yeah.
And in the, since 3 years now, for about 3 years, there had been no high-profile visits between both countries. But now, in recent times, we have seen Antony Blinken, Secretary of State, going to China, promising that his own visit was to open the line of communication, reopen channels of communication between both countries. And that has been followed up now by Janet Yellen, Treasury Secretary, also going on a high-profile visit. And, of course, the usual issues, intellectual property conflict between them, climate change, financing, and, of course, Russia, Ukraine, and trying to, restrain China from providing support for Russia. But in any case, it's good that both, economics, both big countries are talking, and I think communication is important. And maybe that will reassure China now, that there's no issue about decoupling. That, nobody really wants to isolate China. And as has been variously suggested, it's better to engage China than to isolate China. That, for me, is the significance. Well, as for Alibaba, yes, the shares rose, as you pointed out, by about 3% this morning. But would that mark the end of regulatory interventions by China? Because Alibaba had the Ant Group had to pay about 3 fines, right? Their IPO was stopped in 2020. In 2021, they were slammed with heavy fine. So that, in fact, Jack Ma had to find a way of relocating. And it looked like he had disappeared. At some point, they said he was teaching in Japan, and he was lying low and all of that. But, at the end of the day, it's good, it's reassuring. The tech companies, may have been reassured, but will it mark the end of it? As for the ECOWAS proposed conference by President Tinubu, well, one of the major mandates of ECOWAS is to promote trade, to facilitate trade. But there are issues among our countries, differences because of either our colonial history or because of the uneven levels of development in West Africa. As you will recall, the conflict between Ghana, well, let's say conflict, yes, that would be appropriate. The trade conflict between Ghana and Nigeria over Nigerians trading in Ghana, right? And the two ministers of trade and finance had to meet. And then, of course, when Nigeria shut its borders, that again affected West African trade. But as I said earlier on, President Tinubu has a responsibility to provide the necessary leadership. Many of these other countries, I don't say it in a derogatory manner, even when they are chair of ECOWAS, they don't really have the capacity to organize meetings on a regular basis. I mean, I'm not putting down, the member states, but Nigeria has the capacity, to provide avenues for further interaction at all levels and move ECOWAS forward. And also, we also have a responsibility, more importantly, to check sectarianism by West African leaders, coup d'etat, which President Tinubu talked about. Macky Sall, is it Macky Sall? Yes. Wanted to do a third term. His people resisted it. Okay, so constitutionalism, good governance, democracy. If you have that strong foundation, that will facilitate trade and integration that the heads of authority and states of ECOWAS are seeking. Thank you very much.
Thank you.